Welcome to the Witchy Work Wishes podcast, a place to find your weekly inspiration for bringing your personal witchcraft practice into your business, work, and office. Welcome back to Witchy Work Wishes. I am so glad you are here with me today as we celebrate another beautiful turn of the wheel of the year, Lughnasadh. Last year, when we celebrated this sabbat together, we spent our time exploring its foundations. We talked about the history, the traditions, the bread baking, the grain harvest, the games and gatherings, and all of those beautiful golden correspondences that just make Lughnasadh such a meaningful celebration. Now, if this is your very first Lughnasadh, or if you'd like a deeper look at those roots, I would love to invite you back and listen to episode 145. We spent the whole hour walking through the history and folklore and magic of this first harvest festival together. But this year, I don't want to simply repeat what we already know. One of the things I love most about the Wheel of the Year is that while, we return to the same sacred places again and again, we never really arrive as the same person. The wheel isn't just a circle that, keeps us going around in endless repetition. It's a spiral. Each turn brings us back with another year of experience, another season of growth, and another layer of wisdom. The person standing here at Lughnasadh this year is not the same person who stood here last year. We've lived another year. We've celebrated and grieved, taken chances and learned some difficult lessons. We've planted new seeds in our lives and watched some flourish beyond our expectations. We've also watched others never quite take root. And that's actually what I want to explore today with you. Not just the harvest itself, but our relationship with the harvest. Because planting is one kind of magic, right? We love that phase. Growing is another, also amazing. But standing in the field, looking around at everything you've nurtured, and allowing yourself to truly receive what you've created, well, that is a very different phase and a very different kind of magic. Before we jump into today's episode, I always like to share a few things that have been happening in my little corner of the world. First, thank you to everyone who joined us for our Hearth and Hen Circle gathering on Saturday. I know we just talked about casting circles a couple of episodes ago, but these gatherings are something really, really special to me. They remind me that although many of us practice our craft alone, we never have to walk this path alone. There is something incredibly comforting about seeing familiar faces, welcoming new ones, sharing stories, and spending a little time in community with, your people. Your people. I love it. If you haven't heard me talk about Hearth and Hen gatherings before, you can always head over to witchyworkwishes.com to find all the details. But here is the quick rundown. Once a month, we gather live online from wherever we happen to be in the world. We make a cup of tea, light a candle if we want to, just settle into a cozy chair, and simply spend some time together. Sometimes we work through a seasonal practice. Sometimes we learn something new. Bunch of times we're just sharing a bunch of stories. A lot of chit-chat about life and witchcraft. Every gathering so far has been a little different, but they all have one thing in common. We leave feeling a little more connected than when we arrived. So to everyone who joined us this month, thank you, thank you, thank you. You make that circle feel like home. And I already cannot wait till we gather again in August. Also, real quick, I wanted to share something that happened at the house here a couple of weeks ago. Now, this isn't the first time this has happened since I moved in. And let's see, I've been here a little over 2 years now. The house is about 100 years old. And as far as I know, I'm only the third owner. I've often wondered, and I really do mean wondered, because I don't know for certain, if one of the women who lived here her whole life still stops by from time to time. A couple of weeks ago, In the middle of the night, both of my cats suddenly came running up to the bed at the exact same time and jumped up on the bed with me and curled right up, like instantly curled up and got as close to me as possible. Now, I know with Ragnar that doesn't really mean much. He's practically attached to my hip, anyways. But Cookie, who is actually my younger son's cat and the elder of our little family, is completely different. She usually keeps to herself. In fact, Ragnar does not often let her share the bed. She rarely even tries, though. She kind of likes having her own space. But that night, they both climbed up, immediately curled as close to me as possible, and also as close to each other, like they were actually touching, and immediately, obviously, woke me up. So naturally, I'm lying there thinking, okay, something's happening, right? Something's going on. The very first thing I noticed was the feeling that somebody else was in the room. What's interesting is that I was not afraid, and neither were the cats really. If anything, it felt more like, they'd come to wake me up because somebody had arrived. I've learned over the years that my cats are pretty good barometers. If they are frightened, I pay attention. But they weren't scared. They were just calm, curious, and watching. My first impression was of an older woman. There was this gentle, familiar feeling, almost like someone coming home. And then I smelled perfume. Not mine, not anything I own, just the soft, unmistakable perfume that seemed to belong to her. I thought it might have been one of my grandmother's, but it wasn't. It wasn't their perfume. Like, I know it wasn't. Now, could it have been another relative, another ancestor? Oh, maybe. I don't know. But it wasn't one I knew specifically. I didn't sense it or smell it being familiar. So I watched both Ragnar and Cookie with their eyes moving across the room together, following something that I could not physically see. There was no question in my mind. They were both tracking the exact same thing. Over the next 3 days, I would sense her every now and then, sometimes at night, sometimes in the middle of the afternoon. Every so often, that same perfume would drift through the house, just for a moment, and I would smile. And then, just as quick as she arrived, she was gone. Now, whether it truly was the woman who once called this place home, I can't say for certain, but it felt peaceful, familiar-ish, very kind. It was honestly a wonderful little visit. I hope, if it is the previous owner, that she is proud of all the work I'm doing here to keep this home in good shape. Well, before we head into today's episode, I wanted to invite you to join us over on Patreon if you've been thinking about taking the next step in your own practice. The podcast will always be a place where we can gather each week and learn, but Patreon is where we actually begin to live the magic. It is where we take everything we talk about here and turn it into a personal practice through monthly worksheets, herbal teas, spells, grimoire pages, and our live gatherings. We don't just learn about witchcraft, we actually practice it. One of my favorite things is that each month builds upon the last. We don't simply jump from one topic to another, we walk the path together. This month, we've been working alongside the wolf spirit, learning about courage, intuition, loyalty, wisdom, and, kind of finding our place within the pack. Now, as we step into August, the owl spirit arrives at exactly the right time. The owl teaches us to slow down, become still, sharpen our intuition, and just truly see what has been there all along. It is such a beautiful continuation of the journey that we've already begun together. Now, if you've been listening each week and finding yourself wishing there was a way to go deeper, a place to actually practice the things that we are talking about, well, that's exactly why I created Patreon. More than anything, it's become a wonderful little community of people walking this path together, encouraging one another, celebrating the Sabbats, sharing our experiences, and growing season by season. I truly would love to welcome you into our little family. If it feels like the right next step for you, you can find everything waiting for you at witchyworkwishes.com, or, just head directly over to Patreon and join our family. Well, speaking of walking the path together, today brings us to a celebration on the Wheel of the Year. Lughnasadh is the first harvest. It is that beautiful moment when we pause long enough to look around and ask ourselves, what has grown? Not just what has grown in our gardens, but what has grown within ourselves. So grab your favorite cup of coffee or tea, maybe a nice slice of fresh bread if you happen to have one nearby, and let's spend a little time together exploring the history, folklore, the magic, and the witchcraft of this ancient harvest festival. Welcome to Lughnasadh. Lughnasadh, sometimes called Lammas, is one of the 8 celebrations on the Wheel of the Year, and it arrives right around August 1st. If you remember from our past conversations about the wheel, this cycle follows the rhythm of nature. It follows the changing seasons, the movement of the sun, the planting, the growing, the harvesting, and the resting. And Lughnasadh is special because it marks the first harvest, the first moment where we stop, take a peek around, and say, okay, hey, something grew here. Something that started as just a seed, something that was planted months ago, that required care and patience and trust, has become something we can finally hold in our hands. Lughnasadh is the first of 3 harvest festivals on the wheel, and it is the grain harvest. This is the time when our ancestors would begin gathering wheat and barley, oats, and, the first crops of the season. It was the first sign that all of the work that they had done earlier in the year had mattered. Then we move into Mabon around the autumn equinox. This is the second harvest, the fruit harvest, the season of apples and grapes and abundance. A time of balance when day and night stand equal before we begin moving deeper into the darker half of the year. And finally, we arrive at Samhain, the final harvest, the last gathering before winter, the time when our ancestors prepared for the cold months ahead and honored the cycle of endings and beginnings. So Lughnasadh begins this beautiful season of gathering, and I like remembering this. I mean, today, if we need bread, we go to the store, or, of course, if you're not in a breakup period with your sourdough starter, you make it at home. But we can walk down an aisle, pick up a loaf, bring it home, and not really think too much about it. But for our ancestors, the first grain harvest meant something completely different. It meant survival and hope. It meant, like, okay, phew, we did it. The seeds planted months ago survived the storms, the heat, the uncertainty, all the things completely outside of their control. And now there was something to harvest. So this was a time of celebration. Communities would gather together, bread would be baked from the first grains, there would be feasting and storytelling and music and gathering and games. People would celebrate strength and skill through competitions. They would honor the land, honor the work, and honor everything that came together to make this harvest possible. Lughnasadh gets its name from the Celtic god Lugh, who I'm going to talk about, because his story and his lessons are so connected to this season. But for now, I don't know, I just like to sit with the idea of the first harvest. We know the world we have right now. It really pushes us to the next thing, the next goal, the next project, the next improvement, the next mountain that we need to climb. But Lughnasadh is all about the pause. Before we rush into what still needs to be done, because there is, of course, more, before we start planning the next season and immediately look for what needs fixing, we stop. We look around and we ask, what has already grown? What seeds did I plant months ago that have now bloomed? What work have I done that deserves to be recognized? Because the harvest isn't only about the final destination, it's about honoring the journey that brought us here. Our Celtic god Lugh is the master of ceremonies for this Wheel of the Year celebration. And if you listened to last year's Lughnasadh episode, we went much deeper into his mythology and stories. But this year I'd like to look at him a little differently, because there is something really interesting about the god associated with the first harvest. Lu is known as the many-skilled one. He is a warrior. He's a craftsman, a poet. He's a musician, a healer, an artist, a leader. He was known not because he had one gift, but because he developed many. Interesting, right? A god connected with harvest is not only a god of farming. He isn't only a god of the grain. He is connected to skill, mastery, and craftsmanship. And that is because the harvest was never just about, what grows from the ground. It was always about what grows within us too. We know a field does not become a harvest overnight. You don't plant a seed on Monday and gather baskets of food on Tuesday. There's a process. Preparing the soil, planting, watering, protecting, and learning and adjusting. Waiting. A lot of waiting. And our skills are pretty much the same, right? The person who is a master at something today was once a beginner. The artist you admire once picked up the brush for the very first time. The musician once played the wrong notes. All of us have at one point been the gardener who killed a plant, or, the business owner who absolutely had no idea what they were doing. The wise person you look up to once had questions. They had to gather knowledge in the village, head into the enchanted forest, and come back wiser. Mastery is a harvest. And I know we look at someone else's field when it's golden and full and ready to harvest, and we compare it to the tiny little seed that we just put in the ground. But we didn't see their seasons. We didn't see their failed crops and all of the years that they spent tending to that field. And this is where I think Lou steps in. He has such an important lesson for us because he was not born the many-skilled one. He became the many-skilled one through practice and patience, through experience, through trying, failing, and continuing. Now cue the wisdom and all the work we've been doing with the wolf spirit. It's not just collecting information. It's taking everything we've experienced and learning how to use it. The wolf spirit this month, well, anytime you're working with it, I guess, helps us to understand the difference between knowledge and wisdom. And knowledge is gathering. Wisdom is integration. And the Celtic god Lu represents that integration. All the skills and lessons and experiences coming together. So as we stand here at Lughnasadh this time, I don't want you to only ask yourself, what did I accomplish this year? Because that's usually where we go, right? The checklist, the goals, the measurable things that other people can see. But I don't know, maybe the better question, the deeper harvest question is, who did I become? What skill did I strengthen? What lesson finally clicked? What situation would last year's version of me have struggled with that today's version of me can handle? Maybe your harvest is patience. Maybe your harvest is confidence. Maybe it's about boundaries or, learning to trust yourself. Maybe your Lughnasadh harvest is simply that you kept showing up this year. And that counts. That totally counts. Because every season you have lived through has taught you something. Every challenge gave you another tool. In some form or fashion, it gave you something. Every experience added something to your own collection of skills. And little by little, season by season, harvest by harvest, you are becoming your own version of the many-skilled one. So I always look at how I can work with the gods and goddesses I'm talking about. And with Lu, I don't know, how do we take this ancient energy and bring it into our modern practice? Because Lu really is a pretty interesting deity to work with. He's not the energy of sitting back and waiting for something to happen. Lu is the energy of the craftsman, the artist, the warrior, the poet, the person who picks up the tool every single day and slowly becomes better. He is the magic of practice. And I think sometimes we forget practice is magic. We love the big moments, the finished painting, the completed book, the successful business, the beautiful, beautiful garden. Or, I don't know, that loaf of bread coming out of the oven, the harvest. But Lou reminds us that the magic happened long before that. It happened every day we showed up, every time we tried again, every time we learned and improved. So, if you want to work with Lou, this Lughnasadh, think about the tools of your craft. And I mean, like any craft. Maybe your tool is a paintbrush. Maybe it is a garden shovel. Maybe it is a kitchen spoon. Maybe it's your laptop or your camera, your journal, your voice, your hands. The things we use to create are sacred. So, a great way to honor Lou this year is a tool blessing. Choose something connected to a skill that you are actually growing. Hold it in your hands. Light a gold, yellow, or orange candle if you have one, something that represents that solar energy of Lou. Place your tool in front of you and think about everything this tool has helped you create. The hours, the learning, the mistakes, the growth and harvest, all of it. And say, Lou, keeper of skill and flame, bless the craft that bears my name. Guide my hands, strengthen my art, let wisdom grow from mind and heart. May every lesson, old and new, become the work I'm meant to do. And then make something. That's the important part, because an offering to Lou does not have to be something you buy. It can be something you create. So bake the bread, write the poem, plant the herb, build the thing, practice the skill, show up. Just show up for your craft. I think that's the offering this year. Lou wants us to participate, to honor the gifts that we've been given by actually using them. Well, we can't talk about Lughnasadh without talking about bread. And yes, if you listened to last week's episode about being a winter witch in summer, you know I recently had a very emotional breakup with my Hecate sourdough starter. We had a beautiful relationship. I fed it, I cared for it, I checked on it every day. It gave me beautiful homemade bread, bagels, focaccia, and crackers. Like, oh, yeah, it was so magical. And then my jeans and clothes and I had a conversation and decided maybe we better take a little space. So my sourdough starter was lovingly tucked away into the refrigerator to enter its winter season. And then, of course, the wheel turns and immediately brings us to Lughnasadh, the bread festival. Like, of course it does. The universe has jokes sometimes. But I think my little sourdough starter sitting in the fridge is actually a beautiful reminder of exactly what we're talking about here. Everything has seasons, everything has cycles, and bread itself is one of the most magical examples of transformation. Think about the journey of bread. I know I'm going to romanticize this because I just love it so much. It starts as a grain standing in a field, growing, reaching towards the sun, collecting all of that summer energy. But for that grain to become something that nourishes us, it can't stay exactly as it is. It just can't. The harvest requires change. The grain has to be cut. It has to leave the field. It has to be ground down into flour. I know that sounds destructive, but it isn't. It's transformation. The grain is not being destroyed. It is becoming something new. Then that flour mixes with water. It rests and rises and changes. And then comes the fire, the final transformation, the heat that turns dough into bread. Sound familiar? Kind of, right? Isn't that a little bit like our journey too? How many times in our own lives have we gone through seasons where we felt like everything familiar was being taken away from us, where we were being changed and reshaped, where the heat was turned up and we thought, I don't know if I can do this. But then we come out, out on the other side different, not destroyed, but transformed. The harvest always requires change. And Lughnasadh reminds us that becoming who we are meant to become often means allowing old versions of ourselves to shift. So, if you would like a really beautiful and simple way to honor Lughnasadh this year, I say bake bread. It does not have to be fancy, definitely doesn't have to be perfect. And if you're not a baker, I'm going to say store-bought bread is going to count here. Simple loaves count. A muffin counts, really, if we want to be simplistic. Remember, your practice is your practice. Now, if you are a baker, as you mix the ingredients, think about everything that came together to create your harvest this year. As the dough rests, think about where you need rest too. As it rises, think about where you have grown. And as it bakes, think about what you are ready to transform. And when you eat it, let it be an act of gratitude, a little spell that says, thank you for what grew. Thank you for the lessons from what didn't. And may this harvest nourish me for the season ahead. And, speaking like a true sourdough addict over here. Yes, if you are wondering, my Hecate sourdough starter is coming out of the refrigerator. And I know, we literally just talked last week about my breakup with the starter. Like we had boundaries, we created space. We decided to have a little time apart. And apparently, that time apart has lasted 1 week until the next Sabbath. Maybe a little over a week, right? But you know what? In my defense, and I do feel like this is a pretty good defense, Lughnasadh is literally the bread celebration. I mean, what am I supposed to do? Ignore my little starter sitting in the fridge, patiently waiting in its winter cave? Oh, I can't do that. So, Hecate will be waking back up. She will be fed and loved, and there will absolutely be a fresh loaf of bread sitting on my counter this turn of the wheel. But here is the difference. And this actually goes back to what we talked about in the dopamine magic episode and winter witches and summer episode. This is intentional. And I'm not trying to make an excuse here. Like, this is a celebration. It is. This is a moment. The magic comes back because there was space. I'm not making loaf after loaf after loaf just because I can. I'm making one because it means something, because it connects me to the season of my practice. You guys are laughing. Okay, because this loaf is not just going to be a loaf of bread. Like, it's a little kitchen spell, a little offering, a little celebration of the harvest. So, Hecate and I are not officially back together. Let's not get carried away. We are just, we're meeting for coffee and bread and, some homemade butter. Baby steps, right? Just baby steps. Okay, on a side note, oh my gosh, I know Lunasa is all about bread, but someone is having a moment in my yard, and it is my mugwort. Oh my goodness. She is absolutely thriving right now. Every time I walk past her, I literally say out loud, like, Muggy Mug, I see you. You are happy, you are growing, you are taking up your space. Now, when we think of mugwort, most of us are immediately going to think about the darker half of the year. We think Samhain, right? The thinning veil, dream work, divination, ancestor work, the more mysterious, shadowy side of witchcraft, and mugwort absolutely belongs there. But the mugwort we use in October is created in the summer. Before she becomes the herb of dreams and darkness, she stands under the sun. She grows through the heat and gathers the energy of summer. And then we harvest her. Witches understand timing, right? We understand cycles. We know that the medicine we need in one season is often created in another. And isn't that such a beautiful lesson? And sometimes the wisdom we use during the dark seasons is actually something we grew during our light seasons. We talked a bunch about this in the Winter Witches and Summer episode. The strength you need in winter might be from something you harvested in summer. The courage you need later might be something you're building right now. So, I don't know, maybe not totally off subject. If you have mugwort growing, Lughnasadh can be a beautiful time to intentionally harvest some. Approach the plant, thank her, notice everything she's survived to get here, and then take your cutting, dry it, save it, let it become a little bridge between the seasons, a little piece of summer sunlight that's just waiting for your winter magic. Later, maybe during Samhain, maybe during your dream work or meditation practice, when you reach for that mugwort again, remember, you are not just holding an herb, you are holding a season. I would like to do a little recap of the magical correspondences because, I love that part. And last year we went really deep into these. So if you want the full breakdown, definitely go back and listen. It's episode number 145. But let's gather our magical ingredients for this year. Because correspondences really are just a language. They are the way we communicate with our magic. The colors we choose, the herbs we use, the crystals we hold, they all help us tell the universe, our intuition, and ourselves, this is the energy I'm working with. Lughnasadh energy is warm. It's golden. It's the glow of the sun right before autumn begins whispering. It is abundance and gratitude, transformation and harvest. So let's start with the colors. For your candles, altars, clothing, even your journal, Just think gold for success and confidence and the energy of the sun. Or think summer. Orange for creativity, joy, and that spark of inspiration. Yellow for happiness and clarity and optimism. Grab your deep reds for passion and courage and, the fire that helped you grow. And, of course, some earthy browns just for the soil and the grain and remembering where your roots are. For herbs and plants, this is a beautiful season because the earth is just full of life right now. Wheats and grains are, of course, the big ones. They represent abundance and prosperity and, the reward after the work. Rosemary is wonderful for protection and remembrance, honoring everything that brought you here. Basil brings prosperity, success, and blessings. Mint is perfect for growth and renewal. Thyme carries courage and strength. Lavender brings peace and also reminds us that rest is part of the harvest too. And sunflowers. Sunflowers right now, they are just such a Lughnasadh flower for me. They follow the light. They stand tall. They remind us to turn towards what nourishes us. Very sun energy. For crystals, I don't think about warm harvest energy. Citrine for abundance and joy. Carnelian for creativity and motivation and confidence. Tiger's eye for courage and, kind of stepping into your own power. And amber for carrying the warmth and wisdom of the sun. Then, of course, we have food magic, because we cannot talk about Lughnasadh without talking about the kitchen. Bread, bread, and more bread. Just kidding. Corn, berries, honey, fresh herbs from the garden. These are all ways we can literally bring the harvest into our bodies. Every meal can become a little gratitude spell. Whether you create a full altar, bake a loaf of bread, make some focaccia, I don't know, light a candle, gather herbs from your garden, or just sit outside for a few minutes and feel the warmth of the sun, you are connecting with this energy. Well, Lughnasadh is a celebration. Yes, it is gratitude, abundance, bread, and gathering. But it is also a very magical moment on the wheel because Lughnasadh asks us to do something pretty important. It asks us to recognize when something is ready. The first harvest begins with a cut, and I like that for our craft. We can work with that in our August spellwork energy, because as witches, we know that cutting is not always about destruction. Sometimes cutting is completion. And I have 3 Lughnasadh options for us. A first harvest spell, a Lughnasadh harvest bundle spell, and a Lughnasadh cord cutting spell. Think about harvesting herbs from your garden. When we cut rosemary or basil or lavender, we're not angry at the plant. We're certainly not rejecting the plant. We are saying, you are ready. Your medicine is ready. Your magic is ready. Or, I'm ready to receive what you have created. So for Lughnasadh, I love the idea of doing a first harvest spell. And you only need a few simple things for this one. A piece of string or ribbon, something from nature that represents your harvest. That can be a piece of wheat, an herb from your garden, maybe it's a flower. You know what? Maybe it is a leaf you found on your walk. But hold your plant, your herb, your symbol of harvest, and think about something that you have been growing this year. Not something you want. This needs to be something that already exists, something you've earned. Tie your string around it and say, I honor what has grown. I honor the work it took to get here. I honor the season that created this harvest. And then comes the important part, the cut. Take your scissors, your bowline, your ritual knife, whatever tool feels right in your practice, and cut the string. As you do, say, the growing season is complete. I release the work, and I receive the harvest. And I like this because how many times do we keep tending something that is already ready? How many times do we keep proving ourselves, keep working and pushing, keep trying to earn something we have already created? It's done. And this spell is a moment where you tell yourself, I can stop planting, I can stop chasing, I can receive. And then, take your herb, your flower, or whatever you used, and place it somewhere special. Let it remind you, this is my harvest. I grew this, and I am allowed to hold it. We can also create a Lughnasadh harvest bundle. And I love this because it brings us back to something really simple, something our ancestors understood, the relationship between us and the plants around us. Because for them, harvesting was not walking into a store and grabbing what they needed from a shelf. It was a relationship. They knew the plants, the seasons, and what was growing around them. They knew when something was ready. And I'm not saying we don't, but I like the idea that, we can go back to some of our older traditions for this one. For this spell, I want you to go outside, into your garden or on a walk, anywhere where you can connect with nature, and gather a small bundle that represents your harvest. Maybe you collect rosemary for the wisdom you gained this year, maybe basil for the abundance you created, maybe some lavender for the peace you worked so hard to find. Maybe it's some mint for growth and renewal, or time for courage and strength. Maybe it's a flower because this year you allowed yourself to bloom. Maybe a fallen leaf because your biggest harvest was learning how to let something go. It's your practice. This is your conversation with nature. But the important part is don't just take. Pause. Place your hand near the plant. Notice it. Thank it. Recognize that this little piece of nature grew through its own seasons too. All of them. The rain, the sun, the storms, the hot, hot summer heat, the dark nights. And now you are meeting it at its harvest. Then, when you make the cut, make it an intentional and purposeful cut. Say something like, "What has grown is ready, what has been tended is received, the harvest begins." And then cut, because that cut is sacred. You're not ending the plant story, you are carrying its medicine forward. Bring your little bundle inside and tie it together. You can use string, ribbon, whatever you've got, whatever feels meaningful to you. Maybe choose gold or orange for the sun and harvest energy. And go back to our Lughnasadh correspondences for this and hang it somewhere special, somewhere you will see it, and let it remind you, I grew something this year. I have something to harvest, and I am allowed to receive what I have created. And then as we move through the darker half of the year that is coming, that little bundle carries the memory of summer with you, of this first harvest, a piece of warmth and sunlight, a piece of the version of you who stood here at this Lughnasadh. And then when the wheel turns again, when we reach Imbolc and begin thinking about our seeds and new beginnings, you can return that bundle back to the earth, kind of completing the cycle. Because that is the magic of the wheel. We grow, we gather, we rest, and eventually we begin again. There is another side of the harvest, because every harvest has both, right? The gathering and the clearing. So let's do a little Lughnasadh cord cutting too. And I know when we hear cord cutting in witchcraft, we often think about cutting ties with people or relationships. And yes, it can absolutely be used that way. I've done it. But today I would like to use cord cutting a little differently. I want us to cut the attachment to the seeds that didn't grow, the dreams, the plans, the expectations, the versions of ourselves that we thought we would be by now. Because sometimes the thing holding us back isn't the thing itself. It's our attachment to the old story we created around it. Maybe at the beginning of the year, you planted a seed, right? You had a goal, a plan, an idea of exactly how something was going to look. And oh my goodness, I know I still need to get my mid-year goal check-in episode done. You know what? Maybe next week. Actually, no. It can't be next week. I've got something else. I keep saying I'm going to do this and I don't do it. What am I doing? You guys, I promise I will get it ready. But back to earlier this year. Remember, we had ideas and goals and dreams, right? And now we are standing here at the first harvest, realizing, it didn't grow. Something didn't grow. Or I don't know, maybe it did grow, but differently than you expected. And instead of carrying guilt or disappointment or frustration into the next season, we can clear the field. So for this spell, you need two pieces of string. One represents you. The other represents the thing you are ready to release. Tie them together and hold them in your hands. Before you cut anything, honor it. This is important because this dream and goal mattered. The version of you who planted this seed mattered. So maybe say, I honor the seed I planted. I honor the hope I placed here. I honor the lessons this season gave me. And then take a pause, take a breath, and just ask yourself, what did this actually teach me? And sit with it for a bit. Because even the crops that don't grow, return nutrients to the soil. Even the things that don't work out become part of our wisdom. So, let it marinate, just sit with it, let it be. Then, when you are ready, take your scissors or your ritual blade and cut the cord between them. And say, what did not bloom is released. What I learned remains. The field is cleared and the wisdom is mine. We don't want to cut away the lesson, right? You're not cutting away the growth. You are only cutting away the weight you were carrying around what you thought it should have become. Keep your piece of the cord if you want. Place it in your journal or on your altar somewhere because you are still here. You are still growing and still part of the harvest. Take the other piece, return it, bury it. You know me, I like to work with fire a lot in my practice, so burn it. Do something, place it back into the earth if you want, whatever feels aligned in your practice. Let nature transform it the same way it transforms everything. Because Lughnasadh reminds us, the field cannot be replanted if we never clear what is finished. And sometimes the best thing we can do is just be thankful for the lesson. Release what was, and make room for what is still waiting to grow. Well, that walks us right into the hard part of any harvest. So let's talk about the other side a little bit more. Because it really is easy to romanticize this season. The golden fields and the fresh bread, the baskets overflowing, the abundance. And of course, that is absolutely part of Lughnasadh, the big part of it, really. We should celebrate what grew. We should honor the work we put in. But anyone who has ever planted a garden knows not everything grows. Every seed does not become a flower, just as much as every plant does not produce fruit. Every dream does not become the thing we thought it would become. And that is also part of the harvest. A farmer does not walk into the field at harvest time expecting every single seed that was planted months ago to have become perfect. They know nature better than that. Some plants thrived, some struggled, some just need a little bit more time. Some never, ever sprouted. Some seeds were lost to storms. Some were eaten by little creatures who apparently did not understand those tomatoes were not planted for them. If you've ever tried gardening, you know exactly what I mean. But the farmer does not stand there looking at the entire field and call the whole season a failure because one section didn't grow. They gather what did make it, what did grow, and they learn from what didn't. And they carry that wisdom into the next planting season. But we are just not that kind to ourselves, are we? We look at our own fields and we immediately see what is missing. We see the thing we didn't finish, the goal we didn't hit, the good, healthy habit we didn't keep, the relationship that changed, or the version of ourselves we thought we would be by now. And somehow, standing in a field full of things we actually did grow, we focus on the stupid little empty patch. We are so hard on ourselves. But Lughnasadh asks us to look at the whole field, not just the missing pieces. Because the things that didn't grow were teaching us too. Maybe that dream you planted wasn't really aligned anymore. Maybe that closed door redirected you. Maybe the thing you thought was a failure was actually making room for something else. Maybe you needed that experience. Maybe you needed that season. Maybe you needed that lesson. And I know it does not feel good in the moment, but it might be exactly what you needed. The harvest is not only what we collect, the harvest is also the wisdom that we gained from the growing season. And this first harvest, we can ask, what grew? What surprised me? What am I proud of? But also, what didn't grow? What am I ready to stop watering? What dream or goal belonged to a past version of me? And what lesson did this season leave behind? Okay, my business witches. I think Lunasa is a really important Sabbath for business owners and entrepreneurs, leaders, and really anyone who is working towards something. Because business people, we are really good at planting, aren't we? Really, really good. We love the new idea, the new goal, the new project and dream. We get excited about possibilities. We prepare the soil, we plant the seeds, and we water them. We work late, long days with late hours. We solve problems and push through storms. And then finally, something grows. The harvest arrives. And what do? We immediately start looking at the next empty field. We say, okay, great. What is next? I'm saying this with so much love because I am absolutely talking to myself here too. We are so quick to move the finish line. We hit the goal and immediately create another one. We solve one problem and immediately look for the next thing that needs fixing. We climb the mountain and, instead of enjoying the view, we start looking for the next mountain. But right now on the Wheel of the Year, Lunasa asks us to stop just for a hot second, stand in the field and look around. Because there was a version of you months ago, years ago, I don't know, maybe like me, decades ago, who dreamed about standing exactly where you are right now. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately with my corporate business celebrating 18 years. 8 years, gosh. Like so many business owners, my brain immediately wants to go into, well, what's next? What needs improvement? What system needs fixing? What goal are we chasing now? And I know all of that has a place. Growth matters. Planning matters. I know planting new seeds matter. But so does the harvest. Because there was a version of me in 2008 who was planting tiny little itty bitty seeds with absolutely no idea what this field would eventually look like. I mean, I had a pretty good idea. Vision was there, but that 2008 version of me didn't know the team that would grow. She didn't know the clients that would become a part of the story. She didn't know the challenges that would, shape her or the lessons she would learn from. She was just planting. And sometimes we owe our past selves a moment of gratitude, a moment to say, look, look what grew. And this doesn't only apply to business owners. Maybe your harvest is your career. Maybe it's your family. Maybe it is healing and becoming calmer, kinder, stronger, wiser. Whatever field you have been tending, please don't miss the harvest because you're just too busy looking around for the next seed. Celebrate the progress. Thank the version of yourself who planted it. Thank the people who helped water it. And then, when the time comes, of course, plant again. Dream and grow again. But first, stand in your field. Really stand there because you grew something. We spend a lot of time talking about what we're manifesting, don't we? What we're calling in and what we're releasing. But I think Lanasa reminds us that there is one more question we don't ask nearly often enough. What are we keeping? When our ancestors brought in the harvest, it wasn't simply a matter of gathering everything into one basket. They knew each sheaf of grain had a purpose. Some would be fed to the family, some would be shared with neighbors in, the community, and some of the finest grain would be carefully set aside as seed for next year's planting. Every harvest creates three piles. What am I gathering? What blessings, accomplishments, lessons, or relationships have finally come to fruition after months or maybe years of tending? What am I sharing? What abundance do I have that someone else may need? Maybe it's knowledge, maybe it's kindness, maybe it's encouragement, time, or just simply being present for another person. And what am I saving as seed for next year? Not every gift is meant to be used right away, right? Some dreams need to be protected. Some ideas are still becoming. Some wisdom deserves to be carried into the next turn of the wheel, where it will grow into something even greater. And we save with hope because every ending is quietly carrying the beginning of another season. Well, if you are listening to all of this and thinking to yourself, I don't have anything to harvest this year. Okay, I get it. If that is you, I want you to know that you are not standing outside of the magic of Lunasa. Not every harvest looks like overflowing baskets. Some years the crop is small. Some years life asks us to begin again. And some years the greatest harvest isn't something we can hold in our hands at all. It's the person we've become while tending the field. That's a harvest too, kind of, right? Maybe it wasn't the dream you hoped for. Maybe the business didn't take off. Maybe the relationship ended. Maybe the healing isn't finished. Or, I don't know, maybe you still feel like you are waiting. If today feels like a season of waiting, maybe this Lunasa isn't asking you to celebrate what you've gathered. Maybe it's more about honoring the fact that you never stopped planting. The wheel always turns. The seeds you water today may not become next week's harvest or even this year's, but if you keep tending them with love, intention, and hope, another season will come. The harvest is not a completion. Some years the fields are overflowing. Some years there will be a drought. Some years the crops are going to fail. Our ancestors knew that. They didn't pretend every harvest was abundant. Some years were lean, and those years required different magic. Maybe not celebration, but, resilience and gratitude for what remained, and faith that another growing season would come. Maybe this wasn't the year you gathered abundance. Maybe this was the year that you prepared the soil so next year could be abundant. Well, after all of this, and for your Lunasa celebration this year, I hope you can carry this idea with you. Before you plant again, before you make the next goal and start planning the next version of yourself, before you look towards the mountain that you want to climb, just pause. Stand in your field for a moment. Look around and look at what grew. Sometimes we are just so close to our own lives that we don't see the harvest that we are actually standing in. And I'm saying this to you as much as I'm saying it to myself, because after this episode, we are only a couple of episodes away from something that really still feels a little unreal to me. Episode 200. 200. And when I think about that number, it almost doesn't even make sense in my brain. Because again, here we are. I don't think any of us really see the harvest while we are planting. I did not sit down with episode number 1 thinking about episode number 200. I just planted one seed, one conversation, one story, and shared a journal page of my own with you. One lesson, one little piece of grain at a time. And week after week, season after season, the field kept growing. Some episodes came easily, some were harder. Some were created during really joyful seasons, and some were created during some of the hardest seasons of my life. But each one became part of the harvest. 200 little pieces of grain. And the most beautiful part is that it was never a field I grew alone. Every message you sent, every episode you shared, every time you showed up with your coffee or your tea and spent part of your day here with me, you helped water this little field. And that's another beautiful thing Lunasa reminds us. Nothing grows alone. So today, I hope you take a moment to honor your own harvest. Not just the obvious things, not just the achievements everyone else can see. Honor the quiet growth, too. The healing nobody witnessed, the courage it took to keep going, the skills you built, the wisdom you gained, the person you became. Have you stopped long enough to notice that? Feel the sun on your face, feel the grain beneath your hands, and say, "Look how far I've come." Well, I do have a poem in the moon update. I hope you can stay with me for those. I'm going to go grab those notes, and I will be right back. Hey, this year we've got a Lunasa blessing poem, and it goes. The fields now bow with heads of gold, their whispered stories softly told. The summer sun still warms the land, yet autumn waits with patient hand. The wheel has turned another space, a slower, gentler, sacred pace. The seed once hidden dark below has stretched towards light and learned to grow. So gather now what life has grown, the joys you've reaped, the strength you've sown. Hold every blessing, large and small. for gratitude belongs to all. Share bread with hearts that need a friend. Offer kindness without an end. Leave room within your soul to keep the dreams not ready yet to reap. If baskets seem a little bare, remember, magic lingers there. The richest harvest, truth be told, is often found within the soul. May Lu inspire your hands to create. May courage meet the winds of fate. May every spark you've dared to start become a harvest in your heart. And as the grain falls to the ground, may hope in every seed be found. For every ending, soft and true, plants tomorrow's magic too. The moon this week, as this episode airs on July 29th, is a big, beautiful full moon. We are standing beneath July's full moon, traditionally known, of course, as the buck moon. This moon earned its name because this is the time of year when young bucks begin growing a new set of antlers. Covered in soft velvet and growing a little more each day, those antlers symbolize strength, renewal, and the quiet work of becoming. They aren't fully formed yet, but they are well on their way, and I love how perfectly this mirrors Lughnasadh too. We are celebrating the first harvest, recognizing what has come to fruition, while also remembering that not everything is finished growing. Some dreams are ready to gather, others are still stretching towards the light. A full moon always invites us to illuminate what has been hidden, celebrate how far we've come, and release what no longer serves us. So, spend a little time outside if you can. Stand beneath her light. Thank her for everything this season has already given you, and let her fullness remind you that growth isn't measured by perfection. It's measured by the courage to keep becoming. I hope this buck moon just fills your heart with gratitude for your harvest, wisdom for the path ahead, and hope for all of the seeds that are still waiting to grow. Now, looking ahead for our little family here, next week is a big travel week for me because I'm heading back up to the mountains, my home away from home. There is something about being up there that just settles my soul. The air feels different. The trees feel like old friends, and every year it becomes a place of rest, reflection, and a little bit of magic. This year, though, it's going to be a little different. Things are incredibly busy at work right now. My company is growing again. We're in the middle of some exciting transitions, and there are simply too many moving pieces for me to completely unplug. Normally, I spend that week or two fully immersed in mountain life. I let the days unfold however they want to. I hike, I write, I watch the weather roll in, and I let the mountains remind me that life doesn't always have to move at full speed. So, this year will be a little bit of an experiment. Now, instead of trying to separate work and rest completely, I'm going to practice something I think many of us struggle with: healthy boundaries. There will be a time for work because there needs to be. But there will also be a time when the laptop closes, the phone gets put away, and the mountains have my full attention. Because boundaries are magic, right? Choosing where our energy flows is magic. Knowing when to tend the fire of our work and when to tend the fire of our own spirit, well, that is a spell worth practicing, and I am going to do my best with it. Now, there might be one little bonus because of this. Since I will have my computer with me, I might be able to pop in on Patreon and share a few little videos from the mountains throughout the week. No promises. I have never used Starlink before. This is something totally new for me. And I guess I should say before, I have brought my laptop up to the mountains, but not to connect to the internet. That is a pretty big journal writing space for me, just to type it all out. But this Starlink connection to the internet is totally new for me. And a forest-covered mountain range is probably not going to give me a bunch of sync options. So I don't know, you guys. I'm just going to let the trip unfold naturally. But if a raven lands nearby, a thunderstorm rolls through, or I don't know, I find a beautiful little piece of mountain magic, I'd love to bring you along for the journey. So keep your eyes on Patreon for upcoming videos. Now, that also means I need to do a little planning ahead for all of us here. Before I leave, I have 2 more episodes to record, so everything keeps flowing while I'm away. Thankfully, one of the beautiful things about podcasting, we can spend time together even when we're miles apart. So, next week's episode probably won't surprise you, seeing as my heart and mind are already wandering through the pine trees. We are going to spend some time talking about the Witch of the Woods, a topic that feels especially fitting as I pack my bags and head back to my happy place. And then while I'm up in the mountains, we will reach a milestone. Again, I can hardly believe it. Episode 200. 200 conversations, 200 Wednesdays together, 200 opportunities to gather around this little virtual hearth we've built over the years. I don't think there could be a more magical place for me to celebrate that than surrounded by the mountains that have always felt like home. I will be by the campfire circle, and I will be sharing with you each log I add to the fire. I'm really looking forward to sharing those conversations with you, and I have a feeling the mountains will inspire a few stories to bring home with me as well. If history has taught me anything, there's usually a little unexpected magic waiting for me up there. And you just know I will have plenty to share when I get back. Until then, take good care of yourselves. Enjoy this wonderful celebration on our Wheel of the Year. Enjoy the beautiful buck moon. Celebrate your first harvest, no matter how big or small. I hope the rest of your week is just what you need it to be, and your weekend is amazing. I will talk with you next week. Thank you for joining me today at Witchy Work Wishes, a place to find your weekly inspiration for bringing your personal witchcraft practice into your business, work, and office. For more information and additional content, please visit me online at witchyworkwishes.com. If you want to send me a personal note, please email me at info@witchyworkwishes.com. And of course, you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook. Just search for Witchy Work Wishes.